Let's go to the White House right now, where President Donald Trump has more harsh words for House Democrats. So get this. The president is angered by a Washington newspaper's report saying that some Democratic lawmakers released a video urging members of the military to ignore unlawful orders. In fact, look at this. Trump said on Truth Social this morning, "This is really bad and dangerous to our country. Their words cannot be allowed to stand. Seditious behavior from traitors. Lock them up." And then, a short time later, the president finished with this thought: seditious behavior, punishable by death. Heavy words there. Let's talk about them. CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman joins us now from the White House. So, Willie, take us through what prompted these posts from the president. He is clearly triggered by something.
Okay, so this just happened. And I'm not going to lie, this is absolutely wild. Like, we just witnessed something that hasn't happened in decades, maybe ever. Congress, and I mean both Republicans and Democrats, just came together to do something that nobody saw coming. They killed Trump's executive orders. Not just blocked them, not just delayed them, killed them. Dead, gone, permanently. And look, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, yeah, right, we've heard this before. Courts block stuff all the time. Things get held up. But this is different. This isn't some temporary injunction that'll get appealed for the next 3 years. This is Congress saying, nope, we're done. This is over. You don't get to do this. And they use tools that haven't been dusted off in forever to make it happen. Can you believe this? President Trump, the guy who spent his entire political career flexing executive power, who told us he could do whatever he wanted as president, just got absolutely demolished by the very system he tried to steamroll. And it's not just one order, it's multiple orders, the big ones, the controversial ones, the ones that legal experts were screaming about from day one. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Yeah, that's right, Reed. Well, this video was posted on social media. Democratic lawmakers who also served in the military posting this message to troops, saying essentially that they don't have to follow an unlawful order. Then you saw Trump's response, posting the Washington Examiner article about that social media post, and calling for these Democratic officials, saying that their behavior is seditious and punishable by death. Now, we are seeing a response from House Democratic leadership, who are calling on the president to take this post down. They go into a statement. They say they condemn the president's disgusting and dangerous death threats against members of Congress, and call on the House Republicans to forcefully do the same. They then go on to, as I mentioned, call the president to take the post down, calling it an unhinged social media post.
We're talking about voting restrictions. We're talking about eliminating entire federal agencies. We're talking about cutting funding to programs that millions of Americans depend on. All of it blocked, all of it killed. And here's the kicker. Some Republicans voted for it. Yeah, Republicans. The same party that's been backing Trump on everything for years suddenly grew a spine and said no. So what happened? How did we get here? And why is this moment so much bigger than just another Trump controversy? Because trust me, this isn't just about Trump losing. This is about something way more important. This is about the entire system of checks and balances proving that it actually works. That nobody, and I mean nobody, is above the law. Not even the president. Let me paint you a picture of what's been going on. Trump comes back into office. He's got big plans. He's signing executive orders left and right. And some of these orders are, let's just say, legally questionable. Okay, that's being nice. They're straight up unconstitutional, according to multiple federal judges. But Trump doesn't care. He's pushing forward anyway. He's got his team telling everyone that the president has unlimited authority, that he can restructure government however he wants, that he can change election laws with a pen stroke. And for a minute there, it looked like he might actually get away with it. Because that's how it usually goes, right? The president does something controversial. People get mad. Lawsuits get filed. Things drag on in court forever. And by the time anything gets resolved, we've all moved on to the next crisis. But not this time. Oh no, this time something different happened. The courts moved fast, like really fast. Federal judges weren't playing games. They looked at these executive orders and said, this is illegal. This is unconstitutional. This stops now. Permanent injunctions, not temporary holds. Permanent. And this is where it gets really interesting, Congress woke up. Congress, the branch of government that's supposed to be a check on presidential power, but has been basically asleep for years, suddenly remembered that they have tools too. They've got the Congressional Review Act. They've got the power of the purse. They've got constitutional authority that Trump can't just ignore. So they used it. They voted. And they didn't just vote to express concern or hold hearings. They voted to completely override what Trump was trying to do. They voted to restore funding he tried to cut. They voted to protect agencies he tried to eliminate. They voted to say, the president doesn't get to do this, period, end of story. And here's what makes this moment so incredible. It's bipartisan. In this era where Congress can't agree on anything, where Democrats and Republicans won't even sit on the same side of the room, they came together to say no to presidential overreach. That's how bad these executive orders were. That's how far Trump went. He pushed so hard that even his own party couldn't back him up anymore. So yeah, Trump's power just crumbled. And we're about to break down exactly how it happened, why it matters, and what this means for the future. Because trust me, this changes everything. All right, let's get into the details here. Because the story you're hearing on mainstream news is not telling you the full picture. They're making it sound like this is just normal political back and forth. Just another day in Washington. But that's not what this is, just normal political back and forth. Just another day in Washington. But that's not what this is. This is a constitutional crisis that just got resolved in real time. And most people have no idea how significant this actually is. So let's start with what Trump actually tried to do, because the executive orders we're talking about, it weren't just controversial policy decisions. They were attempts to fundamentally restructure how our government works. And he tried to do it without Congress, without any democratic process, just executive orders. First up, voting. Trump signed an executive order that would have changed voter registration requirements across the entire country. Now, you might be thinking, okay, what's the big deal? Presidents talk about election stuff all the time. But here's the thing. The president doesn't get to rewrite election law. That's Congress's job. That's literally in the Constitution. The president can't just wake up one day and decide, you know what, I'm going to change how Americans register to vote. But that's exactly what Trump tried to do. The executive order would have required additional documentation for voter registration. It would have created new barriers that legal experts immediately recognized as unconstitutional. In the courts, they didn't waste any time. On October 31st, 2025, just a few weeks ago, a federal judge issued a permanent block, not a temporary restraining order, not a preliminary injunction, a permanent block. The judge looked at this order and said, this violates federal law. This is unconstitutional. You cannot enforce this ever. The court literally barred Trump from implementing or enforcing the order. Like game over. No appeals are going to save this one. It's done. And the language the judge used, it was harsh. The ruling basically said the president cannot rewrite election law, period. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. But wait, there's more. Because the voting executive order was just the beginning. Trump also tried to eliminate 4 federal agencies. 4 entire agencies. Just gone. Poof. Eliminated by executive order. Now think about that for a second. These are agencies that Congress created. Congress funded them. Congress gave them authority to do specific jobs. And Trump just decided, nah, I don't like these agencies. I'm getting rid of them. Can you believe this? Like, the level of presidential overreach here is insane. You can't just eliminate agencies that Congress created. That's not how separation of powers works. Congress creates agencies. Congress funds agencies. If you want to get rid of an agency, you need Congress to agree. But Trump didn't care about any of that. He signed the order anyway. And this is where it gets really interesting, because Congress, they could have just complained. They could have held hearings. They could have written strongly worded letters. That's usually what Congress does, right? But this time, they actually fought back. They used the Congressional Review Act. They voted to override the executive order. And here's the crazy part. Some Republicans voted with Democrats. Let me say that again. Republicans, members of Trump's own party, voted to block what he was trying to do. That's how extreme these orders were. That's how far beyond normal presidential authority Trump went. Even Republicans who usually back him on everything looked at this and said, no, this is too far. We can't support this. The vote restored funding for vital programs that Trump tried to cut. It protected the agencies that Trump tried to eliminate. And it sent a message, a loud, clear message, that Congress isn't going to let the president just do whatever he wants. They remembered that they're supposed to be a co-equal branch of government. They remembered that checks and balances exist for a reason. Now let's talk about why Trump pushed this so hard. Because it's not like his legal team didn't warn him. You know they did. You know there were lawyers in the room saying, Mr. President, this is unconstitutional. The courts are going to block this. Congress is going to fight back. But Trump didn't care. He never cares about that stuff. He thinks he can just power through. He thinks if he acts bold enough, if he moves fast enough, he can get away with anything. And honestly, that strategy has worked for him before. How many times have we seen Trump do something legally questionable and just get away with it? Because the system moves slow, because Congress doesn't act, because courts take forever. Trump has made a career out of exploiting those delays, of doing whatever he wants and dealing with the consequences later, if there even are any consequences. But this time, the system didn't move slow. The courts acted fast, Congress acted fast, and suddenly Trump found himself in a position he's not used to being in. He actually faced real consequences, real limits on his power, and he couldn't just tweet his way out of it, or fire someone, or change the subject. Legal experts are now saying things that should terrify anyone who cares about democracy. They're pointing out that the president cannot rewrite election law or unilaterally dismantle agencies created and funded by Congress. That Trump is finding out the hard way that he's not above the law. And that's not from some partisan activist, that's from constitutional scholars, people who study this stuff for a living. The courts are also moving differently now. They're not just issuing temporary holds anymore. They're issuing permanent blocks. They're making rulings that can't be easily appealed or overturned. They're showing real-time enforcement of presidential limits. And that's new. That's different. That's the system actually working the way it's supposed to work. Congress is also setting new precedents here because they're not just blocking Trump's current orders, they're also making it so he can't try this again. The congressional action includes language that bars future attempts to revive similar orders. So Trump can't just wait a few months and try the same thing with different wording. Congress closed that door. They said, this is done, you're not doing this, move on. And here's what nobody's really talking about. This creates new norms for future presidents too. Because now every president knows, if you try to grab power that isn't yours, the courts and Congress are going to move fast to stop you. There's no more waiting around. There's no more assuming Congress will just roll over. The system just proved it can respond quickly when it needs to. Think about what this means. For years, decades even, we've watched presidential power expand and expand and expand. We've watched Congress give up more and more of its authority. We've watched courts defer to the executive branch over and over again. And a lot of people, including me, started wondering if checks and balances were even real anymore, if they were just something we learned about in school but didn't actually exist in practice. But this moment, this is checks and balances in action. This is the system saying actually there are limits and we're going to enforce them. And it's happening because Trump pushed too far. He tried to grab so much power, so brazenly, so unconstitutionally, that even his own party couldn't defend it. He broke the system's tolerance for presidential overreach, and now we're in new territory. Because future presidents are watching this. They're seeing what happens when you go too far. They're seeing that the courts will move fast, that Congress can actually work together when something really matters, that there are red lines you can't cross. The New York Attorney General also got involved in this fight, which tells you how serious the legal community took these threats. When state attorneys general start filing lawsuits to block federal executive orders, that's a big deal. That's states saying, we're not going to let the federal government overstep its bounds. That's federalism in action. That's another layer of checks and balances working. This is the reassertion of constitutional order. This is the system proving it can defend itself. And yeah, it took a crisis to get here. It took Trump pushing so far that even his allies couldn't stomach it. But we got here, and that matters. Okay? So let's break this down into what actually matters. Because there's a lot of legal jargon and political theater around this story. But at the end of the day, there are three big things you need to understand. Number one, Trump just learned that the presidency has limits. Real limits. And I know that sounds obvious, like duh, of course the presidency has limits, but Trump has never operated like someone who believes that. He's always acted like the president can do whatever he wants. He's always pushed boundaries, and for a long time he got away with it. Not anymore. The courts looked at his executive orders and said these are illegal, full stop, not questionable, not a gray area, illegal, unconstitutional. And they didn't just say it, they backed it up with permanent injunctions. Orders that Trump can't implement, can't enforce, and can't revive later. That's real power. That's real consequences. And Congress actually remembered that there's supposed to be a check on the president. They voted. They overrode his actions. They restored the funding he tried to cut. They protected the agencies he tried to eliminate. And they did it with bipartisan support. That's huge. That shows this wasn't just partisan politics. This was lawmakers from both parties saying, no, this is too far. We're not allowing this. So Trump learned something he probably should have known all along. You're not a king. You're a president. There's a difference, and that difference matters. The presidency is powerful. Yeah, obviously, but it's not unlimited. It's constrained by Congress. It's constrained by the courts. It's constrained by the Constitution. And when you forget that, when you act like those constraints don't exist, the system will remind you hard. Number two, this changes the game for future presidents because now there's a precedent. Now everyone knows that if you try to grab power that isn't yours, if you try to rewrite laws through executive orders, if you try to eliminate agencies without congressional approval, the system will fight back, and it won't take years. It'll happen fast. Think about that. For so long, presidents could push boundaries because they knew the system was slow. They knew courts would take months or years to rule. They knew Congress probably wouldn't act. So they could do whatever they wanted and deal with consequences later, maybe. But now courts are issuing permanent blocks within weeks. Now Congress is using tools they haven't touched in decades. Now the system is responding in real time. That's a game changer. That means future presidents, whether Democrat or Republican, are going to think twice before trying stuff like this. They're going to know that executive overreach has real immediate consequences. And honestly, that's a good thing. That's how the system is supposed to work. We don't want presidents who think they can do whatever they want. We want presidents who respect constitutional limits, who work with Congress, who follow the law. And this precedent, it applies to everyone. It's not about Trump specifically. It's about the office of the presidency. Any future president who tries similar moves, they're going to face the same response. The courts will block them. Congress will override them. The system will push back. That's the new normal. Or actually, that's the old normal. That's how it was always supposed to be. We just forgot for a while. Number three, and this is the big one, this moment shows that our constitutional system is more resilient than a lot of people thought. Because let's be real, for the past few years, a lot of us have been worried. We've watched norms get shattered. We've watched institutions get tested. We've watched people in power act like rules don't apply to them. And it's been scary. It's made people question whether our democracy can actually survive. But this moment, this is proof that the system can defend itself. When pushed hard enough, when threatened seriously enough, the institutions that protect our democracy actually work. Courts enforce the Constitution. Congress asserts its authority. Checks and balances aren't just theory. They're real and they matter. Now, does that mean everything is fixed? No, of course not. There are still massive problems with our political system. There are still ways people abuse power. There are still serious threats to democracy that we need to address. But this moment shows that the system isn't completely broken. It shows that when things get really bad, when someone really crosses the line, the guardrails hold. So why does this matter to you? Why should you care about arcane legal battles and congressional votes? Because this affects everything. The president's ability to change election laws affects whether your vote counts. The president's ability to eliminate federal agencies affects the services you depend on. The president's ability to cut funding affects programs that help real people. This isn't abstract political theory. This is real life. Your life. Your life. And the fact that Congress and the courts stop Trump from doing these things, that protects you, that protects all of us, that ensures that laws are made through democratic processes, not by executive decree, that ensures that agencies created to serve the public interest don't disappear because one president doesn't like them, that ensures that the president, whoever the president is, can't just rewrite the rules to benefit themselves. Let's also talk about what comes next, because Trump isn't going to just accept this and move on. That's not how he operates. He's probably already working on new strategies, new ways to push his agenda, new executive orders that try to get around these blocks. And his team is definitely working on messaging. They're going to spin this as Democrats and judges and the deep state working against him. They're going to claim he's being treated unfairly. They're going to rally his base around the idea that he's being persecuted. But here's the thing. None of that changes the facts. The facts are that Trump tried to do things that were unconstitutional. The facts are that courts, including judges he appointed, ruled against him. The facts are that Congress, including members of his own party, voted to stop him. And the facts are that our constitutional system worked the way it's supposed to work. Will there be more battles? Absolutely. Will Trump try other things? Of course. Will this be a long, ongoing fight? Yeah, probably. But this moment, this specific moment where Congress and the courts united to block presidential overreach, this is significant. This is a turning point. This is proof that limits exist and can be enforced. And here's something else to think about. This moment could have gone differently. Congress could have stayed silent. They could have been too divided to act. They could have just let Trump do whatever he wanted, but they didn't. When it really mattered, when the constitutional order was actually at stake, they came together and did their job. That's worth acknowledging. That's worth celebrating, even. The bipartisan nature of this response, that's what gives me hope. Because if Congress can come together on this, If Republicans and Democrats can agree that presidential overreach is bad, then maybe they can work together on other things too. Maybe this is the start of Congress reclaiming its authority. Maybe this is the moment they remember that they're supposed to be a co-equal branch of government, not just a rubber stamp for whoever's in the White House. So here's my final thought. For everyone who's been worried about the state of our democracy, for everyone who's felt like things are spiraling out of control, for everyone who's wondered if anyone is actually going to stand up and do something, this is your answer. They did. The courts did their job. Congress did their job. And Trump's most egregious power grabs got stopped. Does that fix everything? No. Do we still have work to do? Absolutely. Are there still threats we need to be vigilant about? Yes. But today, right now, we can recognize that the system worked. We can acknowledge that checks and balances aren't dead. We can see that there are still people in positions of power who take their constitutional responsibilities seriously. Trump's power crumbled. Congress killed his unlawful orders. The courts backed him up. And the message is clear. Nobody is above the law, not even the president. And that's exactly how it should be. That's the foundation of our entire system. That's what separates us from authoritarian regimes, where leaders can do whatever they want. We have rules, we have limits, and those rules and limits actually mean something. Stay tuned because this story is far from over. Trump's going to respond, his supporters are going to push back, and we're going to be here to break down every single development because this matters. Your democracy matters, and we're not going to stop paying attention. We're not going to let people forget what happened here. We're not going to let this moment fade into the background noise of politics as usual. This was important, this was historic, and we need to remember it.